South China Morning Post, 28th of June 2023, World Economic Forum. After Sri Lanka's rescue revealed vulnerabilities, China is urged to take a bigger part in the financial system. According to economists and diplomats at the World Economic Forum on Wednesday, Sri Lanka's debilitating debt crisis and the protracted wait it had to face before securing a rescue from international creditors led emerging nations to reassess the current global financial framework. They also stated that the world requires a more effective financial system so that debt-trapping China can play a bigger part in resolving crises and boosting the voices of developing nations. The first payment from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, as part of the country's $3 billion bailout took nearly 8 months to arrive, according to Ali Sabry, the Foreign Affairs Minister for Sri Lanka, who noted that negotiations began in September 2021. At that point, nations are seriously stressed and risk disintegrating. So something ready-made must be present, Sabry told a panel on the second day of the 14th annual meeting of the new champions of the World Economic Forum in Tianjin, northern China. Despite receiving a $600 million loan from the World Bank in April of last year, Sri Lanka made its first ever financial default in May of 2022. As a result, in July, it became the first post-coronavirus country to declare bankruptcy. According to the Institute of International Finance, the coronavirus pandemic increased global debt to an unprecedented level of $300 trillion in 2022, making developing countries particularly vulnerable due to the due amounts accumulated, declining currencies and rising interest rates. However, according to Jin Qiu, a professor of economics at the London School of Economics and Political Science, the basic issues with the IMF and other international financial institutions continue to exist. Jin told the panel on Wednesday that the problems include a mismatch in credit cycles and a severe shortage of international emergency liquidity for developing nations. The U.S. monetary policy is mostly what drives the global credit cycle. However, she added, U.S. monetary policy is intended to support U.S. internal conditions rather than international affairs. Therefore, I believe that China can play a role in this situation. China, the world's second-largest economy, frequently provides significant high-interest liquidity to emerging markets, although its credit cycles are not synced with those of the U.S. China has lent enormous sums of money to fund projects through its Belt and Road Initiative, Beijing's strategy to link more than 60 countries into a China-centered trade network, primarily through investments and infrastructure projects. China is the developing world's largest creditor after the World Bank. Amid escalating tensions with the West and claims it is forging debt traps on the continent, China said in August that it would cancel several interest-free loans to 17 African nations. To aid in the recovery from the COVID-19 outbreak and the debt crisis, China also announced that it would redirect $10 billion of its IMF special drawing rights, an international reserve asset administered by the global financial agency. It is time that different types of creditors and economies pulled their resources together and come out with some sort of an architecture, which immediately addresses this kind of emergency to prevent a cascading effect on many of the economies and ultimately leading into a global slowdown, Sri Lanka's Sabry continued. Jin continued, China and the United States also need to improve coordination between their central banks and act as true global financial anchors. However, the current issue is that China also faces significant domestic problems. Although it would like to increase its international lending, it must significantly reduce it due to domestic debt problems and the poor state of the global economy, she said. Jin emphasized that despite China's status as a sizable, high-debt, high-interest creditor to low-income nations, most loan flows come from the private sector, with financial institutions accounting for a sizable percentage. The underlying problem is a worldwide shock and global structural challenges like demographic pressures. And it's not just up to China to find a solution, she continued. Jin also emphasized the importance of better international financial architecture, increased participation of developing market voices in the coordination process, increased central bank involvement in China, and lending in yuan. Peng Peng, executive chairman of the Guangdong Society of Reform, a think tank affiliated with the province government, noted that the global economic growth rate was generally declining. This development would impact the relevant nation's ability to repay loans and China's lending capacity. Large-scale projects could be delayed. In particular, the domestic recovery is not strong, and the geopolitical climate is unpredictable. It is advisable to slow down development.